Arugula as a substitute, as a dairy substitute. This is what folks do when they're trying to sell you something. Create a hack that's not really a hack, more like something to try. And that is the thing. You see, if you want to offer something or offer a way of looking at something, say that. Say, instead of dairy, I made it without dairy. So it's dairy free, and that's fine. To say it is dairy free, this is a dairy free recipe, and therefore there's no dairy in it, and we're going to use these instead. As a way of saying, we are creating this without dairy. And that sets expectations. Versus, this is a dairy substitute, which means you're replacing dairy, but the expectation is that it's going to give that dairy-like feel, texture, taste. And that's false advertising. That is setting you up for failure, because nothing more than thinking dairy substitute and making that said substitute into your meal or food or dish and be disappointed. Now, it's okay. What if you like whatever the swap was? Great. But call it what it is. In this case, and I don't know if you know the story, and I'm not going to repeat it or post it here. Turkey meatballs. Some folks make it in a particular way. Some people put dairy in there, some people don't. If you don't want to put dairy in there, you have plenty of options. You're either going to make it dairy free, or you're trying to say use less fat, or you're not trying to add more fat to, say, the turkey meatballs. Then okay, but it is not a dairy substitute. It is an entirely different recipe. It's an entirely different dish. Call it what it is. And to see why I couldn't be on these shows, because I'd be like, get out of here with this. Just call it what it is. Say you're going to prefer to put arugula in this. It's dairy free, to keep it dairy free. See how that sets up expectation versus this is a dairy substitute. Now, you can argue the technicalities of what a substitute is. That's fine. Do that. Have your way with that. That's not what I'm trying to do. We know when someone says a dairy substitute, it is to mimic dairy without the effects or the impact. Because dairy typically is high in saturated fat. There's additional sodium in there. And if what you're trying to do is remove that, or if you're making it entirely plant-based, then you say a dairy substitute, which is something that's going to mimic, give us similar dairy-like taste, mouthfeel, texture, without the impact of dairy, or without it being the animal product. See how that lands? Versus saying this is a dairy substitute as if this is going to give you the same thing. Arugula and dairy are two different things. They are in two different food groups. They have two different calorie makeup, two different nutritional profiles. They are not the same thing. One is not a substitute for the other. And arugula is certainly not the substitute for dairy at all. So it is important that when you see these things, when you watch these things, you be skeptical. If those question marks pop up in your head like, huh? That's a good thing. That's a healthy thing. Because you know what dairy is, and you know what a dairy substitute is. So to hear that, and coming from a celebrity, I mean, obviously they're going to try and sell something at some point. And grifters will always grift. That's my opinion though. But when you are trying to nourish yourself, the question you want to ask is, what is the goal here? So if I want to make a swap, if I want to take dairy out, what are my reasons for taking dairy out? Maybe I have an intolerance for dairy. Maybe I am trying to eat more plant-based. I don't want dairy in there. So you can do one of two things: completely remove dairy without the expectation of having the experience that dairy tends to give you. And by experience, I don't mean the ill effects. I'm talking about the mouth, the taste, the flavor, that type of thing. If what you're trying to do is, if you don't care about that, then your substitution is going to be in lieu of that. You don't want dairy at all in there, so you're going to take it out. If you want something similar but without the impact of it, then what are you going to put in that is going to make it give you a similar experience? It's not going to be the same. And that's always the important thing. Whenever you're making substitutions in meals or in food, with foods, setting your expectations, managing your expectations is important for the experience you're wanting to have. So if you are, and I will use a popular example, cauliflower. No, cauliflower, I'm sure cauliflower is tired of everybody trying to make it into something it is not. There's cauliflower rice, cauliflower steak, cauliflower wings, or cauliflower bites that are mimicking wings, cauliflower pizza crust. It's fine if you are trying to find, it's okay to find ways to use food to create similar experience. So if you want pizza but you don't want the flour, whether you're gluten-free or you're just not trying to, you're trying to eat low carb, then cauliflower provides that option as far as being able to be manipulated into something, but it is not going to give you the same thing as a bread dough pizza crust. Rice, again, another thing that it's often substituted for. Rice gives a particular mouthfeel, it has a particular taste. You are not going to get the same experience from rice to cauliflower, which is cauliflower that's been, you either grate it or you pop it in the food processor to get it looking like rice. It's not going to cook the same, it's not going to taste the same. And it's important for you to manage that expectation. It's okay if you want the lower calorie option. This is not my knock against having low calorie options or a different thing. This is me saying call foods what they are. And knowing what foods are helps you manage your expectation, because especially folks who are going on diets and want to cut out foods. I see this a lot with people trying to do low carb, and the struggle that a lot of folks on low carb diets have is they're trying to get the same experience out of low calorie foods that they get with the higher calorie food, the one that they're making the swap for. So again, I go back to the pizza crust, the flour pizza crust with cauliflower pizza crust, the rice, cauliflower rice, with the rice being substituted for, or being substituted by, the cauliflower rice. The wings, cauliflower wings, or cauliflower steak, where it's really just this cauliflower that you chop and you season it like you would steak and grill it or pan fry it or whatnot, as a plant-based option to meat, to each his own. Again, cauliflower is cauliflower, steak is steak. They're two different things. And managing the expectation means you know these things so you don't end up disappointed. The problem, again, when people are trying to make these substitutions, they often still expect the same satisfaction from these foods. And this is where we end up disappointed often and always seeking that satisfaction or fulfillment. And fulfillment, I mean being satisfied in the food, being filled. In other words, eating enough. Because that's the other thing. When we make these substitutions, a lot of the times it's not filling. and therefore your brain is trying to get that satisfaction, or your body is trying to be satisfied, and the only way it's going to be satisfied is probably to have some more food with a little more substance. And when that doesn't happen, it's always going to seek that. And so the snacking might happen more often, or the binge might happen. This is I'm talking about people who tend to restrict themselves. That this tends to happen too. But my whole point here is making substitutions or swaps are entirely within your right. Making swaps are something to be encouraged when you have a particular goal. Maybe you're watching your cholesterol, maybe you're watching your blood pressure, maybe you are trying to have, less carbs. Maybe whatever the case might be, swaps are available. You can find ways to eat to suit your goal and be nourished. The problem is, or the thing you want to make sure the trap you don't want to fall into, is to thinking the same satisfaction you get from some foods you will get from the swaps that you are using. It don't work that way. And anybody who try to convince you that it will taste the same, they might lie to you, because they might lie to themselves. And it's the gaslighting that happens. Oh, this tastes the same. No, you are convincing yourself it tastes the same. And regardless of your goal, I don't care what your goal is, cauliflower rice and rice not going to be the same. They're not going to hit the same. They're not going to satisfy the same. And that's the truth. That is the truth. And you can even change your taste buds by eating a certain food for an extended period of time, so much so that you no longer crave the thing that you were swapping it for. So if you eat cauliflower rice long enough, I say that, then maybe eventually you won't crave the rice. If you have the give me another substitute. If you utilize I don't know where I was going with that, but have it long enough and you might not crave the food that you want. So the swapping of foods for whatever the reason, it's not just dieters who do this. People are always health conscious. Maybe you want to have more plants in your diet. That's fine. Having more plants and less animal products, great. But again, know your foods so that you can manage your expectation. It's why I have an issue when the plant-based community tries to tell you that this tastes like chicken. No, it don't taste like chicken. It is not chicken. It is seasoned the way you would season chicken, yes, but it's still going to give me an entirely different experience. Jackfruit, for example, that's used as pulled pork. Pulled pork. Jackfruit is jackfruit. Pork is pork. They're two different things. Call them what they are. So, pork season or barbecue season jackfruit. And I know this is done to entice folks to trying it. And that's okay if you want to entice folks, but be upfront about it. Say this is what it is, plant-based. I remember seeing this video where this girl was creating hot dogs, or she made a video of her making hot dogs, and she's making these hot dogs for apparently people who are coming to her house, and she swapped the hot dog sausage with carrot. Now if I come to your house and you give me a hot dog and it's a carrot in between that bread, we're gonna have a problem. And we're gonna have a problem because chances are you are not going to tell me that's what that is. I'm going to go and see that. You're like, oh, I created this, and instead of, no. It's one thing if your friends, if who you're making your meals for are in agreement with you. That's one thing. But if you're trying to convince others, that's not the way to do it. Slowly introduce people to different ways of having something. It's like if I'm trying to convince somebody, or I'm not trying to, and that's the other thing. I don't think we need to convince folks to eat a certain way. Inviting them does more convincing than pushing it down their throats. So if I am somebody who does not eat dairy and I want to make my meals, I make my meals dairy free. I'm going to state that up front that this is dairy free. My bread is dairy free. I make a lot of anything I bake is dairy free. I share that up front. I am using dairy free butters, dairy free milk, dairy free substitutes, foods that give the similar outcome without the actual cow's milk in it. I state that up front. However, what I'm not going to do is gaslight people into believing that it is the exact same thing. Some products will turn out and you won't tell the difference, and other products or other dishes, it will be very obvious that they're not the same thing. But I think it's important to be transparent when we are trying to experiment with food, or we're trying to make these substitutions with food and involving other people. So if I am saying I am making, this is a dairy substitute, I'm going to set up the expectation and tell you this is an alternative to dairy. It's either dairy free because I'm using something that matches the profile, the taste of dairy without it being dairy, or this is without the dairy because I choose plant-based. It is not dairy, so I'm not expecting the same outcome. I'm not expecting the same taste. This is an option. So instead of dairy, I'm going to use this. Not because I'm trying to mimic dairy, but because I don't want dairy and this is the option I'm choosing. And you have the option where I want to mimic dairy just without it being dairy. See how those two things are different? So when you are talking about food, especially around others, especially when you want to have open discussion with folks around food, especially when you're a meal maker, somebody who's making food for other people or making food and involving other people, it's important for you to know that transparency is important. It's like not wanting, I would not offer a vegan a non meat without their consent, or I'm not going to tell a vegan that they just need to have a bite of it for whatever reason they've chosen not to eat meat. I'm going to say this is either I'm going to offer a vegan option, or I'm going to say this has meat in there. I have no other substitute. There's nothing else that's going to give you the same thing, but there's something else that is suitable for you that has nothing. It's not the same thing. It's completely different. And then you have the option to say, I have something that there is no dairy in, there's no meat, there's no dairy in here. It's all plant-based. I may have seasoned it the same way I would meat, or I may have added the same things I would add if I was making it with meat, but it's not. And so give them the option to choose. All of that to say is, let us be honest. Call foods what they are. Know the foods that we're using, know what we want from the foods that we're using, and manage our expectations. It will make for a much more rewarding food experience. It will make for a simpler food experience and a more sustainable, nourishing experience. That's all I have today. Remember the daily dose. If what you want is more meal ideas, cooking insight, and nourishing ways to nourish yourself, join the weekly dose. That's my email list. And I'll see you back here. Bye.